Hello everyone and welcome back to another video. In today's video, we're going to be talking about the Cafeteria Cup, which was essentially just a Japanese summit. This event's going to be coming in at a B+ tier, and we also had a handful of invaders that made it extra interesting. And our top 16 finishers and our only 16 finishers are going to be Naucha, NaterU, Samuel, and Cosmos in 13th, Gluttony, Base Mage, Jogabu, and Takara in 9th, and 7th you had Senra and Ouch. 5th was Oimo, Kinaji, 4th was Apollo Kage, 3rd was Neo, 2nd was atelier, and winning the entire thing was Zomba. So let's just get right into it. First player I want to talk about is going to be Naucha, and I was thoroughly impressed by them at this tournament. I wasn't expecting too much going in. They're from the LCQ. I wasn't too familiar with their game, if you will, but they ended up taking a set versus atelier, who went up to get 2nd place in the tournament, and that's a massive win right there. They also took a game versus Ouch, and the other person in their pool was Zomba, and you can't feel too bad about getting killed by Zomba. He does that to Tweak, and then in the main bracket, he does end up losing to Takara, but he manages to take it to game 5, and I thought this was a very impressive showing from Naucha, and I'm really interested to see if he can kind of keep up this momentum going into 2024. Next player I want to talk about is NaterU, and he unfortunately doesn't take a set, though he does have a couple close calls. Manages to take a game off of Neo in the pools phase, and he ends up getting 3-0'd by both Oimo and Base Mage. And you also should watch that Base Mage NaterU set because it's a very weird matchup, Jigglypuff versus Pichu. Both characters are extremely light, and that main win condition that Jigglypuff has on getting the edge guard doesn't really exist versus Pichu. He has such an amazing recovery, so you're thinking, oh, maybe it's a little bit of struggle for Jigglypuff to get the kill, but nobody really struggles to get the kill versus Pichu. Just a funny matchup. Y'all should definitely check it out. And in the main bracket, you have NaterU versus Jogabu. He ends up losing it, but he does manage to take it to game 5. Really impressive showing in that set. And I think this is great for NaterU. Even though he didn't perform super well at this tournament, just the practice that he's going to get in Japan, I think is going to help him exponentially. We saw it a lot with Tarek in 2023. And if NaterU is able to continue traveling in 2024 to Japan, to America, just to many places in general, it's just going to help with your level of play. He is going to be a bigger threat than he already is. And this guy is already extremely scary. Next up's going to be Samuel, and he's another player that didn't manage to take a set, though he does have a handful of competitive ones. Ends up getting 3-0'd by Gluttony, but it's Gluttony. I'm going to let that one slide. He's a top 5 player in the world. Takes a game versus Takara and has an extremely competitive set versus Senra. Goes game 5. Definitely could have won that one. And in the main bracket, he has the misfortune of running into Ouch. They're from the same region. They have played a whole bunch of times, and a majority of them are going to be going into Ouch's favor. Game 1 was Peach versus K-Rool, though. That was definitely a treat, and then the other 2 games are just going to be on the normal Steve and Wolf, and it was a 3-0 into Ouch's favor. But shouts to Samuel for attending this event. I'm pretty sure he was a late fill-in for Machu, and an event like this is definitely hard to just be kind of dropped into, and all things considered, I think he did pretty well. And our final 13th place finisher, as well as the final player who didn't end up taking a set, was Cosmos. Was not able to recapture that Umabora magic, but that's just because he's saving it for Kowloon. No copium there. And in his pools phase, he does manage to take a handful of games. Goes game 5 with Jogabu in a set that he probably should have won, but you didn't hear that from me. Takes a game versus Apollo Kage, and he does end up getting 3-0'd by Kinaji Shulk. But to be fair, most people were getting 3-0'd by that Shulk. It was definitely a menace. And in the main bracket, he runs into Oimo, which is just a tough opponent to have right away. One of the best players in the world, and he ends up getting 3-0'd. So not as good as maybe you would expect based off that Umabora performance from Cosmos, but he's always been a little bit up and down, and I just hope at Kowloon he's going to be playing well. On to our 9th place finisher, starting off with Takara, and in the pools phase, he manages to take that set versus Samuel, like I mentioned earlier on, but that was the only one he was able to win. Gets 3-0'd by Gluttony. It's Gluttony, I'll let it slide, and does manage to take a game versus Senra, but ultimately ends up losing that one. The offstage game was just too much for him in that set. In the main bracket, he takes that game 5 versus Naucha before being defeated by Apollo Kage. Does manage to take a game, though, and Takara is a player that I feel like often does not get enough credit because he is, like, by far the best Ken in the world. Actually, I shouldn't say by far because Jazo is really good, but Takara is still definitely the best. He's just so consistent with his character. He has the highest peaks, and he's still doing some crazy conversions. Even though I definitely think Ryu is better, there's no denying that Ken is still a very strong character, and Takara was able to showcase it at the Our next player is going to be Jogabu, and it's a bit of an underperformance from him at this event. He was a top 4 seed, but all things considered, I don't think he did terribly in the pools phase. He still manages to take 2 sets versus Cosmos and Kinaji. Both of them ended up going game 5, and versus Apollo Kage, he does get 3-0'd, and that's ultimately the thing that sent him to the losers bracket, because the way these pools were decided was by game count, and Kinaji had an 8-3 game count, Apollo Kage had a 6-4 game count, but Jogabu, despite winning 2 sets, had a 6-7 game count just because both go game 5, and then he loses that one 3-0. So sent to the losers bracket maybe a little bit earlier than he would expect. Does manage to beat NaterU in that game 5 nail biter, but the offstage gameplay was just too strong for Senra as he ends up 3-0ing Jogabu. And sometimes when you're playing Falcon, that's just going to happen. You're going to run into a character that just destroys you off stage, and your bracket run is going to come to an end a little bit early. But at his next events, I'm pretty confident he will bounce back. Jogabu is by far the best Captain Falcon player in the world, and even though this isn't an amazing event for him, it's not the end of the world. Our next 9th place finisher is going to be Base Mage, and he actually has a super good pools phase. He ends up losing to Neo 3-1, but he manages to 3-0 NaterU and 3-1 Oimo. That's definitely a really nice win to have on your resume. Unfortunately, in the main bracket, he does falter, ends up losing 3-0 to Kinaji in the winner's side, and that's definitely a tough matchup for Puff. And in the loser side, he runs into Ouch, maybe a little bit of a better matchup, but still not an incredible one, and Ouch is also an amazing player. Base Mage does manage to take a game, but he ultimately falls at 9th place, and it's still a solid one for him. Getting 9th place at an event like this with Jigglypuff is very impressive, and that race between him and Senra is closer and closer every time. Senra barely edging him out on this tournament, but who knows what's going to happen at Kowloon. And our final 9th place finisher is going to actually be Gluttony, the first seed of the event. And he sweeps his pools phase 3-0 to Kara, 3-0 Samuel. Senra does manage to take him to game 5, though, because every single time Gluttony plays a good Jigglypuff player, it just has to go to game 5. Those are the rules, and it goes without saying, but you should definitely watch that set. When it gets to the main bracket, though, that is where Gluttony ultimately falls. He ends up getting 3-0'd by atelier. Just massive props to atelier for that on the Pokemon trainer. And in the losers bracket, he ends up losing to Oimo in a game 5 set. And Gluttony in the past has always been a little bit shaky versus the FGC characters, but considering that he 3-0'd to Kara, I thought he was going to be fine in that matchup, but Oimo managed to pull through. Massive props to Oimo. And for Gluttony, just getting a little bit of the Japan trip experience. It happens to the best of us. I'm sure this next event, he's going to do just fine. On to the top 8, our first 7th place finisher is going to be Ouch, and he didn't have an amazing pools phase, but to his credit, he also had the hardest pull. At least in hindsight, he had the hardest pull, because both Zomba and atelier were in his pool. He ends up getting 3-0'd by Zomba, does manage to take atelier to game 5, and he beats Naucha 3-1, and in the main bracket, that's where you're seeing Ouch get a majority of his dubs. He manages to beat both Samuel and Base Mage to get into the top 8, and once in the top 8, he does fall to Oimo, manages to take a game, but Oimo is an incredible player. You really can't feel too bad about these losses, and you can't feel too bad about this event at all for Ouch. Again, losing in the pools phase to number 1 and number 2 at the tournament, and then losing to Oimo, who's arguably a top 20 player in the world, is still a very solid run from him. And our other 7th place finisher is going to be Senra, who was the highest placing person out of his pool, and his pool had Gluttony in it, and he definitely had to work hard. He had a 3-1 over Takara, 3-2 over Samuel, and then he loses that game 5 set to Gluttony. Once in the main bracket, he runs into Zomba in the winner's side. Unlucky go next. In the loser side, he 3-0s Jogabu before falling to Apollo Kage. Does take that set to game 5, though, and as I mentioned earlier on with Kinaji and Base Mage, not a great matchup for Jigglypuff, so massive props to Senra for making that set so competitive. And when we're talking about the best Jigglypuff in the world, it's obviously going to be between Base Mage and Senra, and I'm not going to give that title to Senra based off this one tournament, but you are going to give him slight props here going into Kowloon. That could be the deciding event, because we don't know when the next time we're going to see Senra and Base Mage at the same tournament, but in 2024, Senra's the best Jigglypuff. I don't make the rules. Onto our 5th place finishers, starting off with Oimo, and he didn't have a great start to the tournament. In the pools phase, he 3-0s NaterU, but he gets 3-1 by both Base Mage and Neo. In the main bracket is where he makes his money, though. He 3-0s Cosmos, game 5 win versus Gluttony, beats Ouch in a game 4, and takes Neo to game 5 in the run back, though he ultimately does lose the set. And Oimo is just like an incredible player. He is easily the best Ryu in the world. You gotta give a shout out to Icon as well, because he's very good, but Oimo just has this character on lock. He is so good, and I really think 2024 could be a good year for Oimo. He's someone that hasn't won a super major or a major yet, but I think that could be something that we see him do this year, and I'm just excited to see what he's going to accomplish. And our other 5th place finisher is going to be Kinaji, who was also the birthday boy of the weekend. So big claps to Kinaji for being the birthday boy. And also, he farmed this event. He was looking incredible, was first seed in his pool. He does lose a Game 5 set to Jogabu in Snake Captain Falcon, but he 3-0s Apollo Kage and Cosmos with the Shulk. In the main bracket, he 3-0s Base Mage to get into the top 8. And then once in the top 8, he unfortunately does bust her out, losing to Atelier 3-0, and Apollo Kage is able to adapt to the Shulk, and he wins that in a Game 5 set, but still a very impressive showing from Kinaji. Shulk definitely putting in a majority of the work at this tournament, and Shulk is not a super popular character at the top level, so this is probably going to be one of the best Shulk runs that we have all year, and I think 2024 is going to be a very good year for Kinaji. He's such a talented player. He's very young as well, and as he's been leveling up, I also think the Australian scene has been leveling up. He gets to travel to Japan, which is the best place that you could practice, and that character combination of Snake and Shulk is definitely a devious one. Our 4th place finisher is going to be Apollo Kage, and shouts to him for the immediate bounce back after that subpar Umabora performance. Same thing with Kinaji as well. Both those players didn't do incredible at that event, but they immediately got back on the horse and started performing. AK 3-0s Jogabu and 3-1s Cosmos in the pool's phase. Does get 3-0'd by Kinaji, but he still managed to get out in the winner's side, where he would immediately lose to Neo in a 3-1 set, but he has a nice little losers run, beating Takara 3-1, and both Senra and Kinaji in Game 5 sets before running into Neo once again, and he ends up losing that set 3-0. Some Corrin players have been calling Snake Corrin a losing matchup for Corrin. I think they're crazy. I think that matchup is even at worst for Corrin. Her up air is just a nightmare for Snake. She has really good pressure against Snake in the disadvantage, and if she's able to alter her combos around Grenade, and spoilers, she is, because it's Corrin, she has a lot of creativity with her combos, it could just be a massive struggle for the character. Definitely something that Apollo Kage can overcome, and something that he probably will overcome, because he has some of the best worth ethic in Smash Ultimate. So he may have been tricked by the Corrin matchup this time around, but the next time he fights a Corrin player, expect him to do a lot better. In 3rd place, you're going to have Neo, who I was thoroughly impressed by at this event. In the pool's phase, he managed to win the entire thing without dropping a set, though he just dropped a game to everyone, beating Oimo, Base Mage, and NaterU. Once in the main bracket, he keeps up the 3-1 streak over Apollo Kage, and then he gets 3-1 by Zoma. Sometimes it's really your own, and in the loser side, he manages to beat Oimo in a Game 5 set, as well as Apollo Kage in a 3-0. Got even better from their first encounter, and I know when I was talking about Corrin Snake earlier, I was saying it's a little bit tricky for Snake, but overall the matchup is still even. It's not like it's an unwinnable one for Snake. You still have to play extremely well as the Corrin player, and Neo looked very good in that matchup. He seems super proficient, so gotta give him his flowers for beating Apollo Kage twice, and just fell short this time around, losing to Atelier 3-0 in the losers finals. But I think Neo can win a major in 2024. I think Corrin is definitely good enough to win a major, and there are few Corrin players in the world who do it better than Neo. Specifically, there's like one guy that's maybe a little bit better than him, and even that's up for debate at this point, especially if Neo's going to keep putting up amazing performances like this. In 2nd place, you're going to have Atelier, who had unarguably the run of the tournament. Pokemon trainer only, and it didn't start off super great for him. In the pools phase, he loses Game 5 sets to both Zomba and Naucha, does win a Game 5 set versus Ouch, and because his sets were so competitive, his game count was actually good enough to get him through on the winner side. He had a 7-8 game count versus Ouch in 3rd, who had a 5-7 game count, and once he was in the main bracket, he was just unleashed. 3-0'd Glutini, 3-0'd Kinaji, loses to Zomba 3-1, but he beats Neo in another 3-0 before losing to Zomba yet again, this time a 3-0. And just massive props to Atelier for the run. He's been having a bit of a shaky 2023, and now new year, new me, new main, potentially maybe dropping the wolf, or at least putting the wolf towards the wayside for the Pokemon trainer, who just did an incredible job at this tournament. I'm really excited to see if Atelier is going to keep his focus on the PT. I have to imagine the answer is going to be yes after a performance like this, and I hope he's able to get similar results, because he's just such a treasure to watch. And our big winner is going to be Zomba, defending it for NA. And it's not too often I get to say that nowadays, so it definitely feels good. And his pools phase, flawless. 3-0 Naucha, 3-0 Ouch. Does have a game 5 versus Torie, but he manages to win it. And the main bracket, also flawless. No sets dropped for Zoma. He 3-0 Senra, 3-1s Neo, 3-1s Atelier on their second encounter, and in their third encounter, he 3-0s him. Every single set that they played, Zoma got better and better. You could see the adaptation literally based off of the score, which is something that's cool to see. You don't really get to see that in most tournaments. And just big props to Zoma. He was definitely the favorite to win this bracket after Glutini got sent to the loser side so early on, but you still got to give him the credit for it because he was able to take out some pretty incredible players. And as I mentioned, it's not often that NA actually gets a dub, especially in Japan, so he's got to be feeling good about this one. A lot of momentum going into Kowloon. Maybe he'll even win it. We can get our first American to win a major in Japan. Who knows what's going to happen, but as of right now, all I know is that NA finally won, and I can rest easy tonight. I thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed. The support has been absolutely unreal as of late. If there's anything I left out, got wrong, or if you just want to say hi, leave a comment down below. Be sure to sub while you're down there, and I'll see you all in the next one. Bye-bye.